Welcome to Talking Missions. We're happy to have you here today. My name is Brad Murray. I'm with Paul Estabrooks. I pronounced it correct?
You got it.
I
Brad.
got it good. Okay. He's got way more experience than I do. He's spent years in radio, and I'm going to learn a few things here as I go. But we're going to be talking to him. He's been working with Open Doors and Hope Outreach. Is that correct? I'm sure other organizations and things like that. But we'll focus on those three for right now. Author, speaker, and he's speaking here at Missions Fest 2019. And he's going to be sharing with us. We're going to be talking with him about a few things. Now, I'm not even quite too sure where to start. You know, I see Open Doors here. How did you get started with Open Doors? That's an exciting thing, really.
Well, it all started back in the 1960s.
1960s.
Which my children call the Middle Ages.
Middle Ages. Yeah.
And my mother gave me a book called God's Smuggler.
Yeah, I read
by a man
that.
named Brother Andrew.
Yeah, I read it.
It was a classic.
It is.
Has been. In fact, you know, it's still in publication.
Yeah, I
That
believe
was in
it.
'67 it was published.
Recommended reading list. That is a recommended read.
Yeah, no matter what generation you are, you
No.
will be encouraged and challenged
I
and
agree.
blessed by reading.
I agree.
Stop
Yeah.
banging the table, Paul. So, I read that book.
Right.
My wife and I were asking God, what do you want us to do with our lives?
Okay.
And we sensed a definite call to missions.
Right.
We didn't know where. We didn't know what. However, I was working at that time in television in London, Ontario, and radio, sister TV radio operation.
Right.
And I was interested in broadcasting, obviously, as well as production. My favorite part was not necessarily performing; it was more in production.
Well, we need some volunteers to help. So if you want to come on.
There you go. I'd love to. I'm not sure I want to live in cold Edmonton. That's the only thing.
Yeah, I can relate.
So we ultimately went to a missions conference because we just sensed that somehow God was saying missions in our life. We didn't know we had no direct call to a place or whatever, but we went to Urbana, a missions conference for young people at Urbana, Illinois in 1967 at Christmas time. And there, Dr. Robert Bowman, founder of Far East Broadcasting Company, a Christian broadcasting operation in Asia, was speaking there.
Okay.
And we met with him and out of interest in broadcasting, and he said, "You're the kind of guy we need out in Asia." I was finishing university in research and in mass communications and things like this. And he said, "You know, we need some guys like you." He says, "We have good Asians who are doing the on-air broadcasting, but they need some help with research, with understanding of their audiences, and what kind of language the audience responds to." For example, in those days, I mean, it's pretty common knowledge now, but in those days it was a new finding that in Asia, the dominant audience of people responded very positively to the word Jesus Christ.
Okay.
So if you said, "How do you feel about Jesus Christ?" And they say, "Oh, well, he was a good teacher, he's whatever." But if you said then to the same people, "And what do you think about Christians?"
Oh, yes. I
mean, it was a big difference. So one of the things that we learned to share with broadcasters was most people have heard of Jesus, although there is a places in China where they would ask you, "Oh, is he somebody from the next village?"
Right.
You know, but most people have heard of Jesus Christ, and feel positive in the sense that he was a good man, at least they would say. But Christian has a whole different connotation, partially because of history and the Crusades and all kinds of things like that. So we said, well, we'll pray about it. And of course, my biggest challenge was I have to raise my own financial support, right?
That's a huge risk. You got a wife to look after. You
I
didn't have
had
children
two
at that
kids.
point?
We had
You had
two
two kids at that
this
point already? Wow.
And I had a good job and whatever, and with a promise of lots of advancement, but I knew it wasn't where God wanted me to spend my life. When I was a kid, My mom also gave me a book by Pearl Buck, who was a missionary kid from China.
Okay.
And she wrote a lot of novels about life in China before the communist era, way back the last century.
Okay.
But all of her writings had a strong sense of destiny.
Right.
People in there were destined for greatness, destined to do this or that. And all my life I said, God, I don't want to be an average person. I don't want to just live in Canada and do a good job.
Yeah.
I want your destiny for me.
Right.
And so I was always looking for God's destiny for my life. So when this opportunity with Far East Broadcasting came, we prayed about it. And in 6 months, I was worried about raising money. In 6 months, we had all our support.
Right.
And we were out in the Philippines working with FEBC Radio, which was wonderful. I mean, a highlight of our life were those years there. First thing I had to do was learn their language.
Right.
It's not that difficult.
Okay.
I'm not a great linguist, but I have an ear for music and for language. So I learned Tagalog because I was working on a radio station that was dominantly Tagalog.
Right.
So I had to know what everybody was saying, at least on that station.
Yeah.
So we spent a decade with FEBC. I also worked with international broadcasters, Japanese who were broadcasting back there, Chinese, Burmese, India, Indonesia, Vietnam. We had families from all of those countries living together. They were heading the programs that were done to their country. Some of them had recording studios outside who would send tapes in to add to the programming. But they were like the mastermind of their programming, and I was just there to expedite things for them, to help them. So it was a wonderful time.
So you didn't start out like the lead speaker. Like right now, you're the main speaker here.
Well, that's because I'm an old man and I've had a lot of experiences, and I love telling stories.
Right? Yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
Because there are some wonderful stories to tell. This is the thing that so excites me.
Yes.
The way God works in our world is just amazing.
We were kind of talking about this a little bit before. Tell me a story that was. Because we didn't get into Open Doors part yet, did we? We're on the way. We're on the way there. Yeah. So, tell me. I think let's go to Open Doors. Okay. I know I'm bouncing around, but that's the fun part. This is YouTube. Sure. We can get away with more than you can on national broadcasting. So, anyways, tell me So you went there. You're obviously because you made a leap of faith. You jumped. Now. We all know, and all the listeners know, that that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Like you're probably staying awake at night, seeking God like you never had to before. Yeah. And you're going going and talking to people to raise support. That ain't easy. No. That's humbling. Yeah. And it's work. It's a real challenge. So you made those decisions, and you've got now you're where you feel the Lord's called you, and then. I remember reading something about you made a connection, and all of a sudden, Open Doors started coming into the picture. How did that happen?
Well, it started with Brother Andrew, this man who wrote the book that impacted me so significantly a decade before. Right. In 1972, he came to visit Far East Broadcasting Company in Manila because, as well as a big radio operation, we had a huge print shop. Okay. With those big presses that can actually print Bibles. I mean, they have those huge rolls of paper. Mm-hmm.
I've seen them. They're huge. They're wild. Yeah.
You have to have a lot of space and a lot of equipment to do a good job because the paper has to be that thin paper for Bible printing. Right. And he was looking for a place to print some things, and he heard that one of the workers there had a passion for China, a vision for China. Right. And this worker, whose name later became known as Brother David, he was saying to God, I'd love to see 10 million Bibles get into China. They don't have them. Right. So his first effort to meet that vision was to print New Testaments in Chinese
Yeah.
in the shape of Mao's Little Red Book. Now remember, this is still the communist era in
Yeah.
the 70s.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
still the Cultural Revolution actually
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
in China.
Yeah.
And everybody was required to carry in their pocket a pocket edition of Mao's Little Red Book.
Right.
So he printed a New Testament with this identical cover of Mao's Little Red Book.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
he took them to border countries of Asia. Nobody was going into China in those days,
Yeah.
except very few diplomats. That's
Right.
about it.
Right.
So he was finding Christians along the border who would
Okay.
take these things into
Right.
the country.
Right.
Well, Brother Andrew heard about him.
Yeah.
And he said, I need to talk to this guy. So he came to Manila to talk to him.
Okay.
Well, he stayed on our big compound, and my wife was the compound hostess.
Okay.
And so we get first shots at having dinner with him with our family, and
So-
that started a friendship.
Right.
And but he didn't pressure me at all. He
Yeah.
was just telling me about what God was doing and how he was believing God also for these communist countries in Asia now.
Wow.
And then in 1975, he appointed this Brother David as his Asia director
Right.
for Open
Okay.
Doors.
Uh-huh.
And the two of them planned a conference called Love China.
Okay.
All the missions that had a burden for China came together for an
wow.
incredible conference in Manila.
All right.
1.5 years before Mao Zedong died.
Okay.
1.5 years later, the whole thing changed in China and things began to open up
Wow.
and opportunities.
What year was
Well,
that?
1975 was the
Okay.
conference.
Yeah.
Mao died in 1976,
Right,
September or October.
Okay.
In February of the next year, 77,
Yeah.
Canada was sending a friendship tour
Okay.
to China.
Okay.
The guy they picked to organize the 24 Canadians who were to be across the country from all different kind
Yeah.
of occupations, there was one spot for a journalist/broadcaster.
Right.
The guy picking them was a Christian in Toronto
Right.
who knew me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He telexed me. In those days, the communication was by something that most kids haven't even heard of, called telex, and said, "Are you interested in going to China with the
Yeah.
Canada Friendship Group?"
Yeah.
I said to him, I telexed back and said, "I don't even have to pray about this
Yeah,
one."
yeah.
Yes, because
Okay.
we were not getting any responses out of China.
Okay.
We couldn't even prove that people could hear the Christian radio programs
Right.
we were doing.
Right. Yeah.
So I was able to go on that trip 3 weeks through China, monitoring. I had my shortwave radio, my AM radio, and I cassette recorded. There's another good old dating term.
Yeah. Yeah.
On my cassette recorder,
Yeah.
I recorded the Christian radio programs,
Okay.
and they were coming in strong
Nice
and
and
clear. And that was my first trip to China. And
Okay.
and I met a Christian lady who spoke English. She was a doctor who had studied English before the Revolution.
Okay.
Auntie Esther, her name was Esther Lee. And Esther said to me, "Do you have some Bibles? We're desperate for Bibles here. We're leading people to Jesus all the time," she's telling me.
Yeah.
And we have no Bibles for them. And I said, "Well, I've got my own English Bible with me, but that's all I have."
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, just promise me this. When you come back to China, you'll bring me some Bibles." Well, I never thought I'd be going back. This was still difficult
Yeah.
days. Things weren't wide open yet.
Yeah, yeah.
It was very primitive,
Yeah.
most of their tourism.
Yeah.
Well, 2 years later, in 1979, I was going back again.
All right.
And I went, "Oh my goodness, I promised Auntie Esther I'd bring her Bibles." So I go to Open Doors.
Yeah.
They have an office in Manila where I'm living and working. I'm still with FEBC Radio.
Yeah.
And I say to them, "You guys must have a suitcase with hidden compartments in it, right? So
Yeah.
I can hide these Bibles?" They go, No. You don't. We just give you like 50 New Testaments, and you put them in your suitcase and you pray.
And you pray.
That wasn't what I wanted to hear. I mean, I'm really like, what?
Yeah,
I'm going to just put them in my suitcase and pray. They said, "Yeah, that's
the system,
that's
eh?
the system."
Yeah.
So I did, and I tell you, when I went through customs on that trip, my knees were having close fellowship. But you know, now that I look back, it was one of the easiest border crossings I made. It was. They didn't ask me for hardly anything. You had to show them a few things. They didn't open a bag.
Yeah.
And I was in, and Auntie Esther had 50 more New Testaments than what she had before.
Well, that's amazing.
And it was. So when I came back from that trip, Brother David and Brother Andrew said to me, we need someone to head our research department. We have Chinese researchers, but we need a manager of the department. And we feel God is telling us, you're the guy.
Right.
Would you pray about that?
Wow.
So I sent a letter to my pastor and my father, who was a retired pastor, and to my best friend, Dr. Jim Cunningham, who lives in Langley, British Columbia.
Okay.
Today he's in the Dominican Republic, suffering for the Lord in 80-degree temperatures there. Or he would be here with me.
There you go.
We've known each other since we were teenagers, and we've been close friends. So 3 trusted people. I told them, we have an opportunity to work with Open Doors. It will require changing missions. We'll still live in Manila. We'll still be in Manila. Yeah. But we won't be living on the compound. And we're praying about it. We want to know what you think God is telling you about it. Well, there was an appointed day I was supposed to give my answer. Yeah. And we were going to go for dinner with him. And I got 3 letters in the mail that day, the same day.
Right.
From my pastor, from my father, from my best friend.
Right.
All 3 of them said, we've been praying with you, and we feel if God is giving you a go-ahead, we're fully supportive of this move. Right. So I said, hallelujah. And by this time, we were convinced that there were other nationals who could do in radio what I was doing. It wasn't like I was doing something that I was...
Especially when you train people up, too. You've already been giving training and stuff like that, so now,
But there was no one else, in those days, there was no one else doing much into China. Right. I mean, it was very, very early in the stages. And and when I first joined, I was immediately confronted with a project that they wanted 30,000 New Testaments in the southern part of China. And we hadn't even taken 1,000 in before this. Right. So that was called Project Rainbow. Suitcases that weighed 92 pounds each.
And you're going to make them look like 500.
Can you imagine 500 New Testaments in one suitcase?
Wow.
And there was no room for anything else. Just full. And each of us had 2 of these bags. 92 pounds in this hand, 92 in this hand, and a shoulder bag with our toothbrush.
Right.
So, and in we go to the trade fair. And in 10 days, we were able to take 30,000 of these in. It was a miraculous time. The believers called it Project Rainbow because it gave them hope.
Right.
We who carried the bags called it Project Hernia because I'm still hurting from those bags. And that
184 pounds there.
That was the lead up to Project Pearl. After they got the 30,000, they said it weren't nearly enough.
Right.
We really need 1 million, and we'd like to have a full Bible, not just the New Testament.
Yeah.
We need 1 million Bibles if every Christian we know in our area is going to have a Bible. Right. And that became Project Pearl, which we did in 1981. And I was already, I was just thrown into a baptism of Bible deliveries from the beginning of time I was with them.
Wow. Is that a secret how you got that 1 million in?
No, I wrote a book now. In 2008, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I wrote the defining book on the whole story. Since I was the coordinator, I knew all the inside information. And as well as what our researchers inside China were telling us was going on inside the country. And it's called A Night of 1 Million Miracles. It's on Amazon and
so it's still available.
Open Doors,
okay, cool.
And it tells the whole story. But we essentially, God just did miracle after miracle. So the night when it came time to deliver those Bibles, we were totally convinced God was in this.
Right.
But it was the most exciting, if you want the most exciting night of my life. Imagine dropping 232 tons of cargo on a beach in China with hundreds of Christians waiting there to get them. Right. We used a tugboat, which we named Michael after the archangel, and a barge after Gabriel, but barges in the Philippines were feminine, so we called her Gabriela. On Gabriela, we had 232 one-ton waterproof wrap packages. And with electric doors on the side of the barge.
Okay.
The barge also was semi-submersible, so it could go down just to the water level, not below the water, but to the surface.
Right.
Cargo go off the deck out into the water. Small boats to tow those blocks that floated into the shore, where the people came out to their neck in water.
Right.
Hauled them up on the beach, cut open the waterproof wrapping. Then there were cardboard boxes with 90 Bibles in a box, which they handed daisy chain up the beach.
Which would be heavy too. If there's 90 in there, they got some weight. So there's going to be some tired campers that night. Yeah.
Yeah. So it took us 2 hours. We had hoped to do it in an hour, but it took pretty hard to practice.
Yeah.
So it took us 2 hours to offload all of those, and nobody was around, and nobody stopped us. I mean, it was just a miracle of God.
Yeah.
But he performed miracles all the way. I mean, the tugboat cost $500,000.
Yeah.
And we're a small mission. I mean, our whole. I mean, this project was going to cost $7.5 million.
Right.
Our whole year's budget in the time was $10 million.
Right.
Now, in 1 year, we're going to make it $17.5 million.
Right.
And that's a huge jump.
Yeah.
So just the faith to believe
that
that could even happen financially was a major step of faith.
That's, those are big hurdles. Again, it's like step by step. The faith has to be overcome. Somebody has an idea of like, well, let's drop off a whole whack of Bibles. How many did you say? I'm sure everybody's kind of like, I can just see that meeting, right? It's like, we can do it. I got an idea. And like, okay, it better be a good one.
Yeah, we had a missionary in the Philippines who literally lived by faith.
Yeah.
He was an old sea captain.
Yeah.
He moved to California. He's an American.
Yeah.
Moved to California, worked for the fire department.
Okay.
And as you know how they have time when they're not out fighting fires, and he was reading the Bible.
Right.
And he came to faith in Jesus.
Okay.
And then he turned to Matthew 28 or the end of Mark, and Jesus says, "Go into all the world and share the gospel."
Right.
He's going, "Oh, okay.
There's a plan.
That's what I'm supposed to do."
So?
Okay. So he and his wife just jump on a plane and they go to the Philippines, and he starts a movement among young people at university called Jesus People. Remember, in the late 60s, there was the Jesus People movement in California.
Yeah.
He was a product, actually, of that whole thing, and he started Jesus People Philippines, working with university students.
Right.
And having an incredible impact on him. He was a very charismatic kind of personality guy, very outgoing. Kids loved him.
Yeah.
Well, he was an old sea captain. And when he was a good friend, and we took him into our confidence. We have a secret project. He goes, "There's only one way for that kind of weight, and that amount of cargo. Even no airplane system is going to work.
Right.
The sea is your only option." And so he designed that whole project, and he became the captain, and engineered that whole thing right to its fulfillment.
Yeah, so it sounds like if there's a crazy idea, it might be from God.
Well,
and it might be somebody who can
follow
solve it.
through. See, so we didn't have a whole lot of things, and as we're going along, there was one roadblock after another. For example, we had 20 guys. We decided they had to be Christians because we couldn't hire a crew to do this who weren't Christians, because you're going to lay your life on the line for this.
No, exactly.
So they obviously had to be open doors people who were committed to say, well, we'll take the risk. Because we know that this is going to be something for the kingdom.
Right.
So, but we had to get licensed to be seamen, to work on a ship. Well, we registered the ship with Panama, which is a flag of convenience, as they call it.
I've heard.
But even then, you have to get seamen's passes for 20 guys.
Right.
Well, and the only guy who had any experience was the captain.
Right.
And he had all these young guys to train. And, I went in the first day to the embassy in Singapore, where we found the tugboat. We were preparing it. And said to the guy, "We'd like to get seamen's passes for our 20 men." And he goes, "That's not possible." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, I need this, I need that." And of course, I didn't say anything to him about how much it costs. So I think he was assuming that being a Christian group, we didn't have any money.
Right.
So we prayed about it, and Brother David said to me, "Look, take the cash. We know how much those seamen's passes cost. So you go back again, and you tell them, hey, we're really serious about these seaman's passes. Here's the cash. And I set it on the table.
Right.
And the guy, I mean, it was a stack of Singapore dollars.
Right.
And he looks at it and goes, oh, so you really are serious? And I said,
yeah.
And he said, well, okay, the next thing you have to do is they all have to pass a medical exam. So we got to go get your medical exam. And then we need to have the officers have to be registered.
Right.
You know, that was the next step. That was another hurdle because we weren't. Even the captain no longer had papers that he was a captain.
Right, that's right, yeah.
So all of these hurdles seem like, okay, it's not going to go anywhere. And we're working on a timeline, a deadline.
Yeah.
And God just kept overcoming every hurdle, whether it was money or these permits, the vehicles, the tugboat, the barge. All of these things were, just one miracle after another. So, as I say, by the time we came to the night of doing this, we were so convinced that God was in this that we were willing to take the risk. It was
that's exciting. Let me again. We're going to change it up here a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're talking about. So we're seeing hurdles being jumped, and the Lord coming through. The work that you're accomplishing. Now, what about you? What about something that hit you personally hard, that stopped you in your tracks, and it was a stopper, but how you worked through that and how God came through for you?
Well, for me, it was I was first mate on the tugboat with under the captain, and it meant I had to be, because it was a secret project. Yeah. I was away from my family for 6 months.
That's a long time.
With no contact, I couldn't phone.
Right.
Had no telephone connection, and my dear bride just had to trust that God was looking after me, and I had to trust He was looking after her. Now, her benefit was there were other wives in Manila where she was that would get together and pray together often, so it was good encouragement.
Yes.
But it was, by the end of 6 months, it was stress.
Yeah.
We had 3 kids, 2 of our own in Canada before we went, and then we adopted a Filipina baby girl in the Philippines. Right. Today she's a TV host on 100 Huntley Street.
Oh, really? That's kind of cool.
A program called See, Hear, Love. It's a women's program. It's online. Her name is Melinda, and she has the distinctive Filipino name as Estabrooks. Melinda Estabrooks. Classic Filipina, and she's a TV host.
Okay. Cool.
And really,
so not too far from the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Well,
no matter.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I have 3 kids at home. I have my bride, who at that time, 1981, we were married for like 16 years at that point. And that, for me, that was the hardest challenge. And to have no communication. Yes. Was really, really, really tough.
I can imagine.
And, even though we knew we were doing God's work and we were doing it for the Lord, but because of security restrictions, Brother David was a real stickler on security. This had to have the element of surprise, he felt, in order to be successful.
That makes sense. And at least one thing, you have to worry about anybody sticking a cell phone aboard.
Yeah, that's right. In those days, that's right. My goodness, it would be, do it, or sending a Facebook picture.
Facebook pictures, kind of like selfies. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. That I can see that. It's like sometimes we hear that story, we kind of go, well, that's exciting, that's adventurous. But I read, another book that affected me was Bruce Olson, and I read that the first time when I was young, and I'm going, wow, what an adventure, how exciting. I read it again a number of years later when I was a little bit older, and everything I read, I go, that was hard. Yeah. That was really hard. Yeah. From a different perspective. Yeah. And so I'm kind of getting what you're saying, when you're separated from your family for 6 months on a dangerous mission, they no contact, they don't know if the boat's on the top of the water, underneath the water. They don't know.
That's right.
China isn't going to be telling a whole bunch of people.
About the boat. They didn't even really know
that was happening.
I couldn't even tell them much about what we were doing.
Right. So they're praying, and they're believing. You got the Chinese government, and you got all these different kind of things who may not be happy about this situation. So I can get that. That is now on the opposite side. Now, because you've talked about this. Well, I'll have to ask for another story, because always this is one of your favorite stories. This many Bibles, and I get it. Like that, I get that. Yeah. What is something also personal that just kind of like you've gone through all this? You're quote unquote retired, quote unquote, as we say, but you're working with another Hope Outreach. Is that correct? Yeah. What has been one of the greatest highlights? What has been the thing that just kind of like all this has been worth it?
Well, I think it's people coming to the Lord.
Yeah.
In the days when we did radio, especially on what was called shortwave, which was very prominent in Asia, not so much in Canada, you didn't have immediate feedback from your programming.
Yeah.
So in addition to helping these broadcasters, I was co-hosting with another Canadian guy a 2-hour morning show called Morning Coffee in English on the English service, which was reaching young people throughout. I mean, they could hear it in India from the Philippines after the second bounce. First bounce was Thailand and Burma. Second bounce was into India when it bounces off the ionosphere. The radio signal hits the ionosphere, bounces back down. That's the concept of the technical way that shortwave radio works. Which is why here in Canada we can hear at nighttime. Yeah. You can hear southern U.S. radio stations sometimes.
When I was in Vancouver, I used to do that more. Yeah.
So I'm doing a program every morning.
Yes.
And, except for mail, and we got some mail from people. That's the only way you knew anybody was responding. Yeah. And how do you know if anybody's being impacted for the gospel? I mean, I'm spending all these hours doing programming. Yeah. And, of course, this was a morning show, so we did music, we did news. We had news and feature items, and then we had a significant spiritual impact time, at least 5 to 7 minutes every half hour. So I got a letter from Burma, which is now Myanmar. And it was a young man who said, we listen to your program every morning, and I have all my high school friends come over to my house. Right. And because, it was 8 o'clock in the Philippines, it was 6 o'clock at their time. Right. So they heard the program at 6 in the morning, their time. Right. And he said, all my friends come over before we go to school. We have morning coffee with you, but we drink tea. But we have tea. We have tea. You guys are drinking coffee. It's fine. Yeah. And he said, we'd like you to come and visit us sometime. Yeah. So twice a year, I did a travel around the region, monitoring how the frequencies were being heard in the countries. And I was in Thailand, and I sensed the Lord saying to me, hey, it's just a short hop over to Burma. The visa's easy to get. Yeah. So why don't you go visit these young people? So I did. And I was absolutely blown away. There were 24 young people that met together. Yeah. And my buddy, who was the co-host, was doing it alone because I'm traveling. And he'd say, good morning, Paul. I don't know where you are today. You're scheduled to be in Thailand, but I hope you're listening. And for all you listeners, I'm alone because Paul's over there. Anyway, I'm sitting in Burma listening to this.
Listening to him.
With them.
With them.
And afterwards, I said to them, you all know that the reason we do this program is because we really are interested in your following Jesus and giving your life to Jesus. Yes. So how many of you have done that? And all 24 of them, they put up their hand. And I said, did you understand what I mean? Like, it's not easy to follow Jesus in a different culture, a different region of faith. This was a basically Buddhist area, and many of them came from Buddhist families. Right. And, are you? How many of you really, I want to know, are committed to follow Jesus? Every one of them put up their hands, and I just said, "Oh Lord, I am just so overjoyed. If this group is the only group that all of those hours impacted, it was worth it. And I know that there were many others, but we don't know. You don't know. We'll never know until heaven what."
You don't know, and I think it's just taking steps of faith. We don't know what kind of impact we can have on someone, and it's like we were listening to a lecture earlier about somebody just saying the same thing, that sometimes it's the little things. It's just the willingness to open up and be warm and represent Christ to people, and things happen. And those are opportunities, and every opportunity is an amazing thing. So part of our vision is to be on mission and live a life of purpose. And so you've done that.
Well, looking back now in life, like you said, as an old guy, now looking back, like my mentor, Brother Andrew, who, if you asked, what would you do differently if you live your life again? He says, I would be more radical, not fanatical, but radical. Because serving Jesus is worth every minute of it. And why not give 100% instead of 98%?
Well, let me ask you this: you've been dealing with some of these things. Do you know people who've died for their faith in these things?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, and they their death was not in vain. I mean, very small percentage of Christians will ever be martyrs. Even with hundreds in Nigeria today are being killed for their faith. So there are lots of martyrs still, but when you compare them to the whole Christian church body, it's a small percentage. But those that do, usually their life has a significant impact in some way. Well, when I think of myself as a young boy, Jim Elliot and those 4 men that were with him, who went to Ecuador.
It's Ecuador, that's right.
Among what was then called the Aka Indians. And now they're the Huari or something like that. That impacted me incredibly. These guys would give their life to share the gospel with an unreached tribal group, and they did. And it impacted the world. I mean, it was a strong. And Jim Elliot's quotes now are still quoted all over the place. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And I mean, that has impacted me all my life. So I mean, and who knows how many his death impacted who are serving the Lord around.
Well, I heard missions just jumped after that. People started signing, and I think that's a big thing. Like, there's a lot of people out there listening, and people not listening for that matter, who just think it's like, well, let's go to church on Sunday, let's do nice things, and it's about not doing bad stuff. And yet, that's not what I'm reading. I'm not reading it. That's not a relationship. Not doing bad stuff is not a relationship.
That's
that's and it's not very exciting either. Not doing bad stuff. I mean, like, but
and Jesus, if you really follow what Jesus said, he said, your job is to lay down your life, is to deny yourself every day, take up your cross. And he said this before he died, but they knew what the cross was. It was a terrible form of execution. And follow me. So, I mean, if you even just take that one statement of Jesus, you're to deny yourself. That's even harder than physically dying. If I have to die to Paul every day. So I have met others who lost their lives for the Lord, and they have had tremendous impact. And I was just sharing this morning here, 20 years ago last month, a missionary in India named Graham Staines from Australia worked among lepers for 30 years. He and his sons, he took his 2 boys to a summer camp. There were no beds. This was in India. There were no beds left in the camp. It was so full. So they slept in their Jeep. He had a Jeep. And in the middle of the night, an extremist Hindu group came and set the Jeep on fire and held poles against the door so they couldn't get out, and the 3 of them burned to death. And that was 20 years ago. And His wife was left with one daughter.
Wow.
And no boys and no husband.
Wow.
And she went on national television in India, and she said, God will, these men who killed my family will have to answer to God someday. But in the meantime, I must do what my master instructed, and so I forgive them.
Wow.
And our colleagues were friends of hers, and they were visiting her many times, and they said people would come to her door after this happened every day and say, how do I become a Christian like you, who can forgive people who killed your husband and your sons?
Yeah.
It's not a natural thing, and she could only do it through God's help.
By God's
but
grace.
he worked among lepers, who were the least of these, is what Jesus called. And so there's a movie out right now in the theaters in the United States. It hasn't hit Canada yet.
Right.
And the movie is about Graham Stain's life
Really?
and death.
Okay.
And it's called The Least of These, the title.
Wow.
And I've read reviews, and it's getting very, very good reviews. Excellent movie. So it shares what it means to in every way give your life to Jesus. So he gave up life in Australia to go to India. He had a very productive years of helping people with leprosy.
Right.
And God used him. And then he and his two little boys are, horribly killed as martyrs because of their faith, really.
Right.
And yet that impact continues on. This is 20 years now since, and it's just
to all be the glory of God.
Amen.
It is. Is it an adventure? I don't think that's even the right word. I mean, really,
it is an adventure.
It is an adventure, but it's like that. Somehow that's like
not the
that
way
limits
we
it.
the way we traditionally think of
Right.
adventure.
Yeah.
They have excitement.
Yeah.
I mean, there is excitement. Imagine dropping 1 million Bibles on a beach in China.
Well, that sounds
in one
exhilarating.
night.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of miracles of God. There was just a lot of faithfulness of even people who prayed, people who gave.
Yeah.
People who then spent 5 years distributing those Bibles all through the country.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of faithfulness.
Those like you think of those Chinese people, they're are constantly at risk. They're doing things and at risk, and there have been so many people who just keep risking it and paying the price, and sometimes the ultimate price. Well, we consider the ultimate price actually, but is it really? And it is and it isn't. Like what did Paul say? To live is
to live is Christ and to die is gain.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And that is just, and that's what I kind of wanted to touch on. When you're talking with Brother Andrew and stuff like that, we're obviously talking about dangerous stuff. Yeah. When we're talking about open doors and the different things you've been involved with, we're talking about dangerous stuff. And I want people to realize that it's worth it to live for something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
You're talking about a life of meaning. What's bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah.
And if you were to work for the broadcasting and made a good career, was that bigger than you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you made a choice and a decision to serve the living God and to come what may, and kept making one choice after another. Got harder and harder and harder to make. And that's often the Lord's. Sometimes the first decision isn't so hard. And then it gets harder and harder and harder. But the first one seems huge. And then you think, oh, that was nothing.
Yeah, but once you see God then provide for that first decision, then you realize, okay, I can trust Him now for even more.
Yeah, no, that's very exciting. Yeah. So, let's talk about Hope Outreach for a second or two, and then let you share with that a bit.
Yeah, okay. Hope Outreach is a ministry in Canada that supports Bethlehem Bible College, which is celebrating their 40th anniversary. 40 years ago, a young Palestinian Christian man named Bashara Awad was a school teacher, and he realized there's no training for university-level students here in Palestine. So somebody gave him $20 to start a new school.
Wow.
So with $20 US in his pocket, he began a school that has started in rental buildings and with a few pastors teaching.
Right.
And today it's a large scale with 3 large buildings that's part of their campus.
Not a bad deal for $20.
No, not
That's
at
pretty
all.
exciting.
And they're training Arabic-speaking young people for ministry,
Right.
both missions, pastoral,
Okay.
and other Christian occupational
All right.
roles.
Okay.
They also, as a school, they also do training and tour guiding because they're in Israel.
Yeah.
It's a logical one.
Yeah.
And they have a media center training too, where students can learn the ability to communicate through media
Okay.
at the school. But their primary faculty is biblical studies.
Okay.
And so they have students there. So we raise money for scholarships for these young people in Canada.
All right.
And also take people there to see the school. So this October of 2019, I'll be leading a team of Canadian people. We'll stay they have a large guest house at the school. We stay right at the Bible College and travel around through Israel from there, from Bethlehem, and then visit another ministry we support there is called Musalaha, which is an Arabic word for reconciliation. Okay. So what they do is the systemic problem in the area is Arab side of the wall hate the Jewish side, and the Jewish side hate the Palestinian side, and this has been ingrained in them since childhood. Right. So when if they become believers, and many of them do, they don't automatically lose that prejudice. Right. So Dr. Salim Munair, who heads this ministry, takes groups of Messianic Jewish Christians. Right. These are Christians and Palestinian Christians. Right. They go out to the desert on a camping trip. Okay. And live in tents like Father Abraham.
Yeah, right.
And they have to learn to cook for one another, find water, and they share time together and get to know each other. Wow. And it breaks down the wall that is naturally there between these two groups.
That's pretty
amazing. They realize,
we're
brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
While we have different political situations in which we live, we can still be one in Christ. That's right. So Musalaha does this work. They do it with adults, they do it with young people, and in the summer they do it through summer camps for children. Okay. But with the children, it's not limited to Christians. Okay. So in the camps they have Muslim kids, Jewish kids, as well as Christians from the two sides. Right. So they have, and so far in Canada, we raised money to pay for one complete camp in the summer. Cool. Of all these kids coming together. Wow. So Hope Outreach is basically a support group for what God is doing in Palestinian Israel. Okay. Realizing that He is Lord. The Jewish people are still His chosen people. Right. And there is a destiny for them that God has designed. Right. But in the meantime, under their occupation live other Christians who need our prayers and support. Yeah,
absolutely. Let me ask you, in closing here, can you share, I know we've been able to hear your ups and the downs, the hards, the price tag. You're talking to, I'm going to go with somebody in transition. I won't just say a young person, but somebody in transition. What would your advice be to them? They think they want more out of living than just being, like you said, just kind of an average life. What would your advice be to them?
Well, my advice would be the words of Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, and that's to keep their eyes fixed on Jesus. Because if you focus your life on Jesus, if you get to know Him, and of course the best way to know Him is through His Word. I mean, there's lots of things written about Jesus, especially in the New Testament and those four Gospels. If you read those four Gospels in a historical way, in a devotional way, in a spiritual application way, it's going to change your life.
I agree.
And even for believers, after Jesus ascended to heaven and will return someday, Christians are constantly advised, even now, to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus.
Right.
So if you're not a Christian, you need to get your eyes fixed on Jesus.
Amen.
If you are a Christian, you still keep your eyes
Yeah.
fixed on Jesus.
That's right.
Because it's all about Him.
Yeah.
And He's the one who will come and reign someday. We will all stand before Him.
That's right.
As He is part of the Godhead, so
Yeah.
we will stand before Him regardless of what we decide here.
Right.
We will have to give an account of ourselves before Him someday, and that's a good basis for wanting to please Him and serve Him.
Yeah. So
and it's worthwhile. Like, it's worth it all.
okay, now on that subject, it just made me think. The word obedience comes to mind.
Yeah.
You've been obedient. You know, these challenges are put before you. God says, "Will you do this?" And you prayed about it. You thought about it, and with fear and trembling, you said yes.
Yeah. Right.
And obedience. How does a person make that step of obedience?
It's a deliberate choice. So, I mean, in many things in life, we have to make a choice.
Right.
And so I choose to follow Jesus and be obedient to Him. It's it in some cases it may be a sense of risk. Mm-hmm. It may feel threatening.
Right.
Although once, as you say, when we make the first choice and the first steps, it does become easier in the sense that you know that, hey, He's looked after me all this way.
Yeah.
If He now asks me, one young man, when I was in Iran a few years ago, or actually it was a neighboring country where we were doing some discipleship training with young Iranian believers,
right.
And this young man who I was rooming with said to me before we left, he says, "You've done some big projects for God, but God is telling me to tell you that He has one more big project left for you to do."
Right.
I went, "Oh my goodness, I don't know if I could handle another one."
Right.
But and the pastor who was sharing with these young people, from Iranian pastor, said, when somebody makes a prophecy over you, you don't grab onto it and say, "Okay, Lord, you got to do this." He says, what you do is you write it down in your notebook. On this day, somebody said, made this prophecy.
Right.
And then you wait. You just live your life as Jesus wants you to live it, step by step.
Right.
But he says, in the day comes when that happens, you go back and look in the book and say, "Look at that.
There it is.
Back here, there it was."
Yeah.
And so I have no idea yet what this, if indeed there is this great, but it's exciting to think about it.
Right.
It's a challenge. If it doesn't have to be the same thing, but in his statement, it's going to be something as significant.
Right.
I say, "Okay, Lord, I'm ready. I'm willing. I will obey when you tell me what it is."
I like that. Well, that's good. Well, Paul, I want to thank you. I'm going to knuckle bump you because I've been fighting the cold here. So who knows? Maybe the knuckle bump will become my signature statement. You got to have a signature statement.
Right.
There you go.
That's right. That's a good
I
one.
want to thank you for sharing those words, the words of encouragement, the easy and the hard, your life with us and the honesty. We want to thank you for that and these opportunities. If you look on our website, there will be these different things. He's also a prolific author. He's written 5 books. I heard when Jordan Peterson say how hard it is to write one book.
Yeah.
And he's written 5. Yeah.
I've watched all of his stuff. I'm amazed at the impact. I know 3 young men who've come to faith in Jesus because of him. He doesn't claim to be a Jesus follower.
Yeah.
But he's getting young people to read the Bible. Yeah. And all you have to do is read that New Testament and you are going to meet Jesus.
Well, I just feel like, and even for this, listeners, like, if, I don't have to teach you. If I can just get you to read the Word, I'm done. I can go sit down and have a coffee. I love coffee. We can just go have coffee, sit down, relax, and let the person read that Word and do what they're doing. You don't have to sit and listen to your pastor. Well, I'm not saying that the right way. Listening to the teaching of the instructor is good, absolutely.
Yes.
But prove them right or prove them wrong. Read that Word. Take that inside of you, allow that to transform you and make you somebody else. If you want to live that life of adventure, you want to live that life of challenge, that's what you got to do. If you don't know your leader, how are you going to follow him? How are you going to be participating with the one whom you love if you're not in love with him? There were these books. I'm going to try to get a list of those books from you, and we'll make them available not available, but they'll be down below. And the YouTube thing, the guy points down, and all that stuff is down there. On your website, we'll have references to Paul here, and different connections you can make. But we hope this time has been encouragement for you. We always believe there's somebody out there that each speaker is talking to. It doesn't matter whether it's somebody as old, because you said that we're so I can play around with it. I love people who they just want to joke. But somebody is seasoned, really, as Paul, or maybe somebody new, like a younger lady we're talking to. But people will connect with somebody, and that'll spark something. So we're encouraging and we're praying with you that these things will spark something in your life that'll make a radical change. Paul, can I get you to pray for the people listening that something will change and they will make choices that are hard?
Yes, indeed.
Amen.
Let's pray.
Amen.
Lord, we thank you for your leadership in our lives and your availability to be the leader that we need to follow.
Yes, Lord.
And we thank you for those who have been watching, listening today. Mm-hmm. And we do pray that you would indeed impact their lives. They would be willing to give themselves to you, to read your word, to learn about you, and to be then willing to follow you and commit themselves to sharing your love with a world that's desperate in need of love.
Amen.
And so we thank you for who you are.
Yes, Lord.
We thank you for how you lead and direct and guide us.
Yes, Lord.
And we thank you for what you want to do in the lives of each person who may be listening or watching this.
Amen.
And we commit them to you and ask you, Lord, to touch their lives.
Yes, Lord.
And meet the needs that they have, and may they, in turn, be willing to give themselves 100% to you and to your calling and your direction. In Jesus' powerful name we pray. Amen.
Thank you.
And amen.
Thank you, Paul, for that. Thank you for your prayer. Thank you for your words. And brothers and sisters, we just wish blessings upon you guys, and we'll see you at the next interview. Talk to you later. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sir, I really want